The 5 psychological stages of regime collapse. How power really falls. Ladies and gentlemen, most people think governments collapse because of protest, economic crises, or military defeats, but history tells a different story. Power rarely dies from the attack itself. Power dies when the people protecting it stop believing it can survive. That is the psychological reality we will explore today. This is not simply a discussion about politics. It is a study of human nature. Whether we examine corporations, criminal organizations, empires, or governments, the same psychological mechanism appears again and again. People do not move when danger appears. They move when they believe it is safe to move. And that moment changes everything. The invisible beginning of collapse. From the outside, a regime may appear strong. The leader still gives speeches. The security forces still wear uniforms. The institutions still function. The media still projects confidence. But beneath the surface, a very different process may already be underway. Fear, suspicion, private calculations, silent contingency plans. Psychologists call this a shift from collective confidence to individual survival thinking. When people stop asking, how do we protect the system, and begin asking, how do I protect myself, the countdown has already begun. Stage 1, the removal of the leader. Many people assume the fall of a leader automatically means the fall of a regime. History shows that is often false. Sometimes the leader disappears, yet the system survives. Why? Because institutions can temporarily replace individuals. The more important question is not, has the leader fallen? The real question is, do the elites still trust one another? A regime can survive without its founder. It cannot survive without mutual trust among those holding power. Stage 2, elite reorganization and strategic positioning. Once leadership changes, uncertainty enters the system. And uncertainty is one of the most powerful forces in psychology. Nobody knows who will rise. Nobody knows who will fall. Nobody knows which alliances still matter. At this stage, people begin watching one another more closely than they watch their enemies. Publicly, everyone speaks of unity. Privately, everyone is assessing risk. Who has influence? Who has foreign connections? Who might become expendable? Who might become the next target? Political scientists call this elite fragmentation. Psychologists recognize it as something even more fundamental, the beginning of trust erosion. Stage 3, the first defection. This is the critical stage, the stage that determines whether collapse becomes possible. Throughout history, powerful systems have often depended on 3 groups: military leadership, intelligence services, judicial or enforcement institutions. As long as these groups remain united, regimes can survive enormous pressure. But the moment one influential faction concludes, I can survive better outside the system than inside it, everything changes. This is where organizational psychology intersects with criminal psychology. Power networks often operate like a shared risk partnership. Members protect one another because everyone is exposed together. The rule is simple. Silence guarantees protection. But when one insider successfully defects and survives, a new psychological rule emerges. Defection becomes a path to safety. That single change can spread through an organization faster than any protest movement because people learn from outcomes. Once they see betrayal rewarded, loyalty becomes harder to justify. Stage 4, public resistance meets institutional hesitation. The public often receives the credit for bringing down governments, yet mass demonstrations alone rarely determine the outcome. The decisive factor is whether institutions continue enforcing the system. When citizens protest and security forces obey every order, the regime usually survives. When citizens protest and institutions hesitate, history enters a new phase. Why? Because perception changes. People no longer ask, can the government stop resistance? They begin asking, does the government still control its own people? The psychological monopoly on authority starts to crack. And once authority becomes questionable, it becomes fragile. Stage 5, cascade collapse. This is the stage most people notice. But by this point, the real battle is already over. The collapse appears sudden. In reality, it was years in the making. A minister resigns. A general defects. An intelligence officer leaks information. A judge refuses cooperation. A political ally changes sides. Each decision appears isolated, but together they create a cascade. Like a row of dominoes, every fall increases the probability of the next one. The system does not collapse because it was attacked. The system collapses because confidence disappears simultaneously across multiple centers of power. And once confidence vanishes, fear spreads faster than authority. The final psychological trap, perhaps the most fascinating aspect of power, is that it often cannot recognize its own ending. Ancient wisdom observed that people approaching death sometimes fail to understand what is happening to them. Power behaves in remarkably similar ways. Leaders rarely believe they are losing control. Instead, they become more suspicious, more defensive, more isolated. They see enemies everywhere. And in doing so, they often create the very conditions that accelerate collapse. Purges increase. Internal investigations expand. Loyalty tests become stricter. Trust disappears. The system begins consuming itself from within. What was once a strategy for survival becomes a mechanism of self-destruction. Conclusion. When we examine regime collapse through the lens of psychology, a clear pattern emerges. The leader falls or becomes weakened. Elites begin repositioning themselves. The first major defection occurs. Institutions hesitate to enforce authority. Collapse spreads through a chain reaction. The crucial lesson is this. Regimes do not usually fall because they are attacked from the outside. They fall when enough people inside conclude that loyalty is no longer the safest option. That is the moment when power ceases to be a system and becomes a collection of individuals pursuing survival. And history shows that once that transition begins, the outcome is often only a matter of time. If you enjoy exploring the hidden psychology behind power, leadership, and historical change, be sure to subscribe, share this video, and join us for future discussions. In our next lecture, we will examine another fascinating question. Why do opposition movements sometimes wait instead of striking at what appears to be the perfect moment? The answer reveals even deeper truths about political psychology, fear, and human behavior.